Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Thursday, June, I want to say 9th. Nice. Thursday, June 9th, 2022. I'm Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and change. I'm sure a lot of you are looking forward to Thursdays now that we have the lovely and talented Bill Kurelic and Mark Porter here. If you are watching on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, do whatever you need to do to like it, smash it, subscribe to it, do what you got to do. If you're listening on the podcast version, please give us a 5-star review. We need them. Okay, today is going to be a pretty basic show in terms of template, but the content will be spectacular. Ohio State hosted camps on Monday and Tuesday, and Bill and Mark were there with bells on. They saw a ton of prospects. So we're going to go in chronological order here. We're going to review Monday. We're going to review Tuesday, and then we're going to take as many of your questions as we can. Gentlemen, are you ready?
Yep, ready to go.
Always ready. On Monday, let's start with the most well-known name to pop out of there. As I said on Tuesday's show, if you are a boarding house devotee, you knew that Chris Henry Jr. will be attending West Claremont this year as a freshman because his guardian, Adam Pac-Man Jones, is in charge. Chris Henry Jr. is a fantastic receiver prospect. You all remember his father, who died tragically in an auto accident about 12 years ago. He was on the Bengals at the time. His son is a spitting image of himself. Literally, I think everyone could have picked him out without knowing who he was. He was something special. He earned an offer from Ohio State as basically a rising ninth grader. Bill, can you explain to us what you thought of him? And then, Mark, put in context what it's like for a guy to get an offer this early from Ohio State.
Well, as you alluded to, Dan, yeah, he's the real deal, even as a rising ninth grader. And he became the second rising ninth grader to be offered by Ohio State. And I know Mark and I talked about that at camp, and he has some thoughts on eighth graders going into ninth grade getting offers. And I mentioned that. I think I was asked about that in my chat on Wednesday. Is it a good thing? And I'll let Mark go into that a little bit more. But 2 ninth grade to be offers already. And I guess if you're going to offer one, Chris Henry's certainly a worthy guy because he is very, very good. Bloodlines, of course, and he's got some length, catches great catch radius. He was outstanding and without question one of the top guys that I've seen at the camps. We've had several of them so far this summer.
Mark?
Yeah, first let's go back to the Bengals 12 years ago. I believe it was Ocho Cinco, A.J. Green, and Chris Henry were the 3 receivers. And Chris Henry was about to be the best of all of them. Had a few Randy Moss-looking moments, the long drink-of-water type receiver that was jumping up over everybody. His kid is a clone of that, long for days. Just has all that long speed, all that high-pointing ability. I mean, it's a clone of his father. Unbelievable that he's that developed in 8th grade. You don't find many kids that have that size in the experience level to go compete at the level he competed at. So, yes, he is way ahead of the curve. Tyler Atkinson, the 9th grader from Georgia, was offered. Same thing. He went to camp, and he's ahead of the curve. He's electric. He was beating seniors in high school left and right with pass rush ability. It was undeniable how good he is. Bill's setting up the good cop, bad cop, and everybody's going to learn I'm the bad cop. 9th grade offers. And Ohio State has never done this before. I mean, Bill, going back, how many times have they offered 8th, 9th graders? These are the first 2. And I don't think it's a road that they know where it leads. And I don't think a lot of people will offer 9th graders because the road could lead other places. Chris Henry, let's just talk out loud for a second that he's a 9th grader who's 6'4", 180 pounds. And he's probably running 4.7 right now, 4.8. Well, if in 3 years he's still 6'4", 180 or 190 pounds, running a 4.7, there are about 300 receivers in Ohio who are doing that right now. Big guys that run 4.7 just isn't good enough to get them a scholarship. Now, we are projecting that Chris Henry will be much faster than that. We are projecting he will be much stronger than that. But there is a percentage chance out there that he normalizes and equalizes and doesn't, blossom the way an early offer would suggest. And the same thing with Tyler Atkinson. He's not defensive end size yet. He's a linebacker size in 8th grade, and he is electric. But do we know if he's a defensive end or if he's an outside linebacker yet? He could stay 190 pounds for the next 3 years or 200 pounds and never grow into the 240 or 50-pound defensive end that he may be projected as. So Bad Cop says, I like the early offers. You have to do it as a big-time Power 5 program, or these kids will not come to your campus. They will not come to your camp, and you never get a chance to woo them and recruit them. So you have to play the game of the early offers. But the more offers you put out like this, the more you're going to run the risk of a bust. And a bust with a big-name player like that isn't fun to go to in 2 or 3 years and say, hey, we're going to rescind the scholarship, and you have not developed the way we think you are. I mean, what percentage of growth do you think Chris Henry has to achieve to truly be a Buckeye caliber receiver in 3 years? Is he 70% of the way there right now? Is he 80% of the way? He just can't be 100% of the way in 8th grade. There is still growth left in him. So I think that's a very long answer for Bucknutters. I've kind of went around. There's a lot there when you offer an 8th grader. You really have to be careful. And boy, he has the lineage and all that stuff. So the math is there. And
I want to add one thing to that I was asked about this in the dean's office on Wednesday morning. What do you think of them? And I'm not sure that I'm the good cop on that even. While Mark might be the bad cop, I'm not even sure I'm the good cop because I'm not totally sold on it either. When you offer a kid going in 9th grade, you do need to get in early on these kids. Competitive recruiting is so competitive, and if you don't, somebody else is going to. But on the other hand, if you are a 8th grader coming to Ohio State's camp, other 8th graders are now able to be offered, so to speak. And maybe you walk away disappointed if you weren't one of the ones that got offered. So, there's a good side and a bad side. And, now that you've got a couple 8th grade offers out, 9th graders to be, other 8th graders, 9th graders to be know that.
Yeah. You set a precedent.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you just set a precedent, like Bill said. And that's a great point, that now the precedent is that 8th graders are in play at Ohio State. And now every 8th grader or 9th grader around the country is expecting it, not going there and just working out for them the way they normally would.
The only thing I take issue with, Mark, is I believe it was TJ Husmann-Zada, not AJ Green, who played.
Yeah, I wondered if that was AJ Green territory, but there were 3 that,
stud.
Bengals fans probably would have corrected me immediately there.
I believe, I could be wrong here, but I know that Carson Palmer was injured in a playoff game. He got his knees sublexed. But I think it was on a long completion to Chris Henry down the right sideline, if I remember correctly. So certainly a tragedy, and that we lost his dad, but he is carrying the torch. And I believe he actually has a younger brother who's supposed to be really good too, but we'll cover that when we go over 6th grade offers. All right. Some other guys at the camp that starred. Let's talk about a guy from my neck of the woods, Dylan Stewart, a defensive end type. They were offering up Chase Young comparisons to him because he's from that neck of the woods. He does not look like a defensive end yet to me. He looks like an outside linebacker with his hand in the dirt. Were you guys impressed? He had an offer when he got there, by the way.
Yeah, he is outstanding. He made guys that are seniors look pretty bad, to be honest. And he was going right around them. Now, what would have been interesting, and I mentioned this in one of my wrap-ups, is that that day there was Dylan Stewart, and there was Will Smith, and there was Nigel Smith. All 3 defensive linemen already had offers from Ohio State before the camp started. In the case of Will Smith, he's already committed to Ohio State. But the group of offensive linemen wasn't as strong that day at all. In the defensive linemen were just really it was a pathway to the quarterback, so to speak. The next day, there was a better group of offensive linemen there. It would have been nice to have seen the intersection of those two groups going against each other to get a much better comparison. But having said that, Dylan Stewart is a great prospect. And for Ohio State fans, the good news is that while he hasn't been a lot of places so far, he told me after the camp that this was, the best place he had been so far. So he came away from the camp he was already very interested, but he came away even more interested. I believe he said to me that from a 1 to 10 standpoint, Ohio State was a 10.
Mark, what do you think of him as a prospect?
Yeah, you alluded that, he's not full defensive end yet. Well, I don't think he can drop and cover. Okay, I don't think he's full linebacker either, but I think he's going to end up defensive end as he added weights, get to college. And let's just describe the scenario there. The first offensive lineman steps up. He comes off the ball, and I don't know if the kid laid a finger on him, but the kid immediately got sent to the back. They brought in another offensive lineman, went right by him. And I'm not kidding you, after about the 4th or 5th rep from these Ohio State offered type defensive ends, the linemen didn't want to step up and go in there anymore. They were absolutely getting posterized. There had to be 30 cameras running, whether it was the press, the Ohio State coaches, Ryan Day standing there. And every lineman that went there, their dream of going to the Ohio State camp and showing Ohio State what they had all of a sudden turned into an absolute nightmare for the offensive linemen, where I don't know if any of them could impress their own parents that day. I'm sure they got into the cars and cried. The offensive lineman might have got beat in 90% of the reps that day by the defensive lineman. It was like Bill said, it was an open gate to the quarterback. And in the combination of extreme talent on defense and just average talent, on offense. I think one of the best offensive linemen was the kid out of St. Charles down there in Columbus. He had a pretty good day. And the kid from Kip did everything he could in pass protection to be long and wide and give those guys a run for their money. But coming off the ball as a defensive end, he was outstanding. I think defensive end as he goes into his career.
I was asked yesterday to compare Will Smith and Nigel Smith. Both were at the camp. Compare them for me, guys.
I'll let you go first on that one, Mark.
Yeah, I thought Nigel Smith was the best defensive tackle at the camp, not including Will Smith at the time. I didn't know he was going to camp again that day. But Nigel Smith was explosive, was active, was athletic, was long. I think he could play end, much like Will Smith. And when Will Smith and him stood next together, I pointed out to Bill, I go, which one of them's bigger? And they were pretty much clones of each other. I mean, when you looked up and down, Nigel Smith, Will Smith, pretty much the same identical kid. Just like Will, a little bit of defensive end traits, a lot of defensive tackle future for him. Will Smith has embraced the defensive tackle. And while I'm talking about Will Smith, I can't tell you, it might have been 5 college coaches to me that said, can you believe what Will Smith is doing? And it wasn't about the pass rushing or what he was doing. This kid is working out at every Ohio State camp and taking reps at every Ohio State camp. That goes to his character, how much you can depend on him, his work ethic, his fear level. He's not scared. How many guys with the commitment show up to work out at one camp? Most of these guys are standing around hanging out with the coaches, and I don't want to bang on them and look soft for doing that, but Will Smith is doing that. Will Smith is talking with his attitude, and one of the coaches said it. We're going to depend on this guy a little bit more because we know where his mindset's at doing this. It's just not something that's common these days. There's a fun attitude to the commitments at any school that, hey, I just show up to camp and I walk around the red carpet and they all pat me on the back. And Will Smith's showing you every rep that I'm going to dominate. I'm going to dominate at every camp, and I'm going to prove that there is no one that I'm not afraid of. And if he takes 300 reps this summer and he loses 20 reps, so be it. Most of those guys are scared to lose those 20 reps and they won't even show up.
And I want to add a couple little stories about Will Smith to that. He was there and is going to continue to be there because he wants to get better. He said it's not about competing really, although he loves to compete. It's about learning from Larry Johnson. He honestly wants to get better every single day, and that's the kind of kids that Ohio State wants. And the second one is that, Mark talked about him going to every camp and working out. He has been told by Larry Johnson to back off a little bit. Mm-hmm. On the third day of camp, the second day in a row, Larry Johnson told him, you don't need to work out again today. You don't have to do that 2 mornings in a row. And the morning before, he was battling cramps, but he kept coming back in. Cramps and all. He said, I'm going to keep going back in there and working. So Larry Johnson told him to back off a little bit, but he still showed up. He was still there trying to learn, trying to learn. He also was there trying to recruit guys for Ohio State. He was doing everything. And then the second story is that going to his character, Will Smith, Mark and I got to know Will early and watched him very early in his junior season and liked him a lot. And that was kind of before he blew up. And we talked about how good we thought this guy was going to be, even though he was young and still developing. And sure enough, he ended up blowing up, becoming an Ohio State recruit. But, Mark and I kind of developed a relationship with him. And Will Smith has not forgot that. When it was time for him to commit, he got in touch with me and said, hey, Mr. Kurelic, I'm going to commit. I want you to know about it and all. Well, and be ready for it. When he was at camp this week, the cramps were really bothering him. And he was struggling a little bit with that. And afterwards, he wasn't feeling very good. And I just asked him about, maybe doing an interview. And he was really polite. He said, I just don't feel up to it right now. And I said, okay, no problem, Will, whatever. So I go out to my car after camp, and sure enough, Will Smith sends me a text message. He felt bad that he was not able to do that interview with me. He really legitimately felt bad about that. He said, I just was not feeling good, Mr. Kurelic. He said, I feel a little bit better now. I'm ready. If it's okay. We did that interview then over the phone, but the fact that, a lot of kids wouldn't do that. And that shows to Will Smith's character.
I know there was some question about Will when he first got his offer. And I think this is going to happen anytime when your father's a well-known Buckeye, that people thought he might have been offered because of his name. And I think he's proven this week that he is an absolutely legitimate Ohio State prospect. And I mean, just in his body type, that's changed since the tape I watched of him. You never would have thought he'd be an interior guy. We were talking outside linebacker to defensive end, and now you're talking about sliding inside. That was less than a year ago. So, I mean, hopes are extremely high for him. So that's excellent. And you guys talked about Nigel Smith.
Along those lines with that body transformation, I'm going to maybe lead you into the next group of guys. Throw Luke Montgomery in there. Luke Montgomery and Smith a year ago looked like different players. Oh, he's a center guard, Luke Montgomery. He's a really active, athletic defensive tackle. He just put some length to his body, and his butt and legs have filled out. And just like Will Smith, his legs and butt have just expanded like you can't believe. I mean, squat rack, leg press, whatever has helped them do it. Those two guys, maybe a year ago, like you said, there were fans and people who questioned it, but the Buckeyes nailed these guys. I mean, these guys have developed into exactly what you wanted.
So that leads us into Tuesday. Another good camp. Some very interesting guys. Not quite the camp we saw where 7 offers went out, but impressive nonetheless. Let's talk about a guy, Mark, you wanted to talk about, Rasheem Biles.
Yeah, that's a guy that at Pickerington Central has been absolutely overshadowed by the extreme amount of talent they've had on that team. Okay, we've talked about the Styles and many other guys there. Rasheem Biles was the real deal at corner. I know he didn't walk away from an offer, but going into senior year with the time he's run, like 4 or 5 or underneath that, he's a 6'1", 6'2" corner with length. He locked down everybody. He made a one-handed Odell Beckham interception over the receiver. It was like playing against a child. I thought that for a lower named kid or someone that we really didn't have on the radar, and I haven't really seen in a lot of forums, We better start talking about him being a local kid. I think it's just a matter of time before the season comes around that maybe Ohio State takes a second look. If they don't get some of the defensive backs that Bill's probably going to talk about, that I've talked with Bill, there's 3 or 4 corners that are strong with Ohio State right now, and he's one of these corners. But, boy, someone's going to get a diamond in the rough with him if Ohio State doesn't take him, because I thought he was one of the best corners there.
Bill, wide receiver Winston Watkins is committed to Texas A&M. I've seen some chatter on the internets between him and Dylan Raiola. How high should our hopes be? He apparently was very impressive.
He was fantastic. He was the star of the afternoon session. He's not real big. He's listed at 5'10", I believe, and 175 pounds. I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but he's good. He's really good. And, you can see Ryan Day spending time talking with him, Brian Hartline spending time talking with him. They offered him a scholarship. And in my mind, he is a kid that Ohio State could flip. Sometimes you offer a kid and he's committed elsewhere and your hopes aren't real high, but this is a kid that Ohio State, in my opinion, can flip eventually. Will they? That remains to be seen, but they have a shot at doing that. And he made some catches. He made one in the end zone falling backwards that was with a receiver relatively, or I should say a defensive back relatively close in proximity. Is just a fantastic touchdown catch. Outstanding speed. I don't really usually like the smaller wide receivers at the Ohio State level that much, but I can see him, his skills translate to Ohio State level, even at his size.
Yeah, IMG Academy, that's where he attends. So shocker, he's super talented, and 2025 already committed. I'm not sure how tight that commitment is. All right, Mark, you teased this a little bit. There were 3 future Ohio State offensive linemen there: Luke Montgomery, Austin Sierreveld, and Zach Padilla. What'd you think of them on the hoof? It definitely looks like they're getting along. That's the future of the interior of your line there, although Montgomery looks like he might be able to split out a little bit.
Yeah, that was the takeaway from those 3 standing there together. Is Montgomery's definitely grown. He definitely expanded his legs, his body, and tackle's now in play because he's always had the feet and athletic ability for it. People just worried about the long arms and the length. The other 2 guys look good standing there. I wanted to go back to that receiver we were talking about with Bill. I know fans out there probably want a comp on him, and I'm sitting here racking my brain. There aren't many small receivers at Ohio State lately. We haven't really seen a 5'9", 5'10" guy, and I hate to go Terry Glenn, Joey Galloway on people because I didn't see that, ridiculous explosion, but it wasn't far off. I think the smoothness that he had is relatable to Terry Glenn and Galloway, the way they could effortlessly run and come in and out of breaks. He kind of looked like that style going forward, especially for a smaller receiver. But sorry to digress back to the receiver, but that's the kind of player you're looking at with him. And of course, those linemen, they're right on par for what we expected.
All right, Bill, we're going to take a break and hit some questions. Before we do that, give us an idea of how the rest of June looks in terms of camps. And then obviously June 24th through the 26th is going to be just a cavalcade of stars.
Yeah, there's they've had 3 camps so far. There are 4 more to go, 3 more one-day camps, and then the 7-on-7 competition camp. Basically, there's 2 next week, 2 the following week. Official visits start this weekend. Not a huge weekend in terms of numbers, but there are some outstanding players that are going to be at Ohio State this weekend. Each weekend gets a little better, or a little bigger, I should say. The June 17th weekend will have more numbers and some great players. And then June 24th will be off the charts. And when we get back, Dan, we need to talk about one other guy that was, I thought, really, really good. Ty Lockwood, the commitment at tight end for Ohio State.
Like Bill said, we're going to take a quick break for our podcast listeners and come back and get into the tight end. All right, we are back. Bill, I was remiss in not mentioning Ty Lockwood as I focused on his 3 other future teammates, but Lockwood was there and was impressive. We had multiple content pieces on him. Your eyewitness account, both of you, of the future tight end.
That is what an Ohio State tight end prospect should look like. Kevin Wilson got him early, and not a lot of people. He was a 4-star guy, but he didn't get maybe quite as much play as some other great players. Ty Lockwood is a fantastic prospect. He's big, he's rangy, he's 6'5", about 225, 230. He's going to get bigger. Splits out at receiver for his school a lot, has receiving skills. He's going to be a good blocker for Ohio State. He is exactly what you look for. And in my opinion, he is a top 5 tight end prospect in the entire country. And I want to say something too about Kevin Wilson recruiting tight ends for Ohio State. He has been all over this. At each camp, you see him with 2, 3, 4 guys that are good players that Ohio State is looking at, that he has there working out to possibly add a tight end to the 2023 class. Because if they can get a really, really good one to go with Lockwood, they'll do that. But also he's working ahead on 2024 and 2025 tight end recruiting. So, he is really doing the work as far as recruiting tight ends for Ohio State, and he helps with the offensive linemen. It was really good to watch. They brought together the 3 offensive linemen and Ty Lockwood together, and then the few other tight ends that Kevin Wilson was looking at. They brought them together in the afternoon session on Tuesday, and Justin Fry was working with them, and Kevin Wilson was working with them. That was great to see, because there was some big-time talent working together out there.
Yeah, you saw him last week. He had Jackson McGowan, the Miamisburg tight end, committed to Cincinnati, and he had Tavion Galloway, obviously the 2024 tight end from Chillicothe. We watched both of those guys. They were outstanding receiver prospects at tight end, and neither one of them really has done much blocking on film. And that was kind of the question mark going into camp. And, as they left and they didn't get the offers, you said, okay, they probably don't know enough about them blocking. Lockwood shows up, and he looks like them receiving, but when you go into the blocking stuff is where he goes into another level. When they run those tight ends down that board and they got to shuffle their feet, he had machine gun firing feet going down that board, where you could see if they got 20 steps going down the board, Lockwood got 30 and the rest of them got 25. That's how much faster his feet were popping along, and the type of explosive quickness he had in his legs. You could see the difference. And Bill said it. That's what an Ohio State tight end looks like. The guy that's got the girth and the build and the thickness, the attitude, the block, and then splits out a receiver and gets rewarded with a few balls out there in the Ohio State offense. But we've talked about this multiple times. Ohio State tight ends come in to block first. They have to secure the edge of the line of scrimmage, or the Ohio State cannot run zone to the outside, just like Ruckert. So he's going to be in the clone over Ruckert, a well-rounded, on both sides, tight end, blocking and receiving, not just the one-sided receiving only tight end.
All right. That was a tremendous review of the camps. Like we said, Bill and Mark are all over it. We are about halfway through the month when it comes to camps. You may want to take off the days before and after June 24th to the 26th. So that's going to be, if it's not the biggest off-season recruiting weekend of the year, I can't imagine a bigger one. All right, let's get to the questions here. First one, Bill from Yakov 22. Did you ever see Chris Spielman play at Massillon?
Boy, that's going back a few years, but I don't remember Spielman's senior season. Mark, do you remember when that was?
I don't even know if I was born yet.
Yeah, I don't remember his senior season. And
is it 88?
What's that?
My guess is 88.
88.
Yeah.
Because I started doing this in 87. So gosh, that's 35, 36, whatever years ago. And I can't remember actually going in person to see him play right offhand. I might have, but again, that's been 36 years. So I can't say for sure I saw him play as a senior in person.
Yeah, I remember hearing about him in high school. Like, I was in high school at that time. I think he may be a year or two older than me.
Yeah.
But in New Jersey, we heard about him. I think he was on the cover of, he was on a Wheaties box.
Yep.
He was on the Wheaties box. I do remember that. Absolutely.
And he had the reputation as the born and bred, linebacker from the Midwest. And I think his dad was a big influence. So he was nationally known.
Yeah, those are my memories. And I have memories in my head of him when they roll the Massillon-McKinley rivalry footage every year, they have throwback footage of him, and I can picture him in the uniform. But boy, that's going back there.
And I will
Mark.
say that going back, I told Landon Pace, Orlando's son, worked out at Ohio State on Tuesday, and after I talked to Landon, I told him, your dad was one of the two best players I have seen in my 36 years in person in the state of Ohio. The two best players I have seen, in my opinion, were the Big O, Orlando Pace, and Andy Katzenmoyer. They're just off the chart talents that just freaks in a good way, certainly. And that's the two best I've ever seen.
The Big O and the Big Cat.
In Ohio, yep.
All right, Mark. Speaking of Ohio,
yeah,
JVM 1341. Mark, how's Youngstown? Any Buckeye caliber recruits from there? Your guy is clearly a Youngstown native, now forced to live in the SEC country, and he needs some help.
Yeah, the guy everybody's talking about in Youngstown is Brian Robinson from Austintown Fitch. He was at the Ohio State camp a week ago. 6'5", 250-pound defensive end. I actually went up to Fitch today. Alabama came in to work him out and watched him go through a workout there. I think I've seen him work out at Under Armour. He is a specimen, the real deal. Bill and I just talked about all the defensive ends that Ohio State has for 23 and some of the other guys working out. He fits in that category. He's just a little bit more raw right now than those other guys. Has a little more they have more experience. He only played Brian Robinson only played a little bit his sophomore year. He got worked in towards the end of the year. We're expecting him to make the big jump junior year. He's put on over 35 pounds, his dad's told me, since last year, in the last 6 months in the weight room. So he's a different human being. Over at Fitch, we have the Hewlett kid who's committed to Cincinnati. I thought he was one of the top prospects in town. Austintown Fitch has another one with Cam Smith, who's committed to Iowa State. Where else? Warren Harding has the linebacker or the running back up there that has some offers in 2024. He'll be a good prospect to look at. But Ohio State to produce a Buckeye, we haven't produced one in a few years. Brian Robinson right now would be the head guy in that lead. Brock Lowry at Canfield just committed to Indiana. So those are the top prospects in town here right now.
All right, Bill. I believe we are legally obligated to answer this question on every show. But the great Sue Zabo asks, what is up with Tate and Innis? It does seem like at one point in time, Moore felt confident about Tate than Innis. I get the feeling those roles have changed, but I defer to the dean.
Yeah, I would agree with that. At one time, everybody seemed to think Tate was going to be a Buckeye and Innis, maybe, maybe not. I do agree. It's kind of changed. I like Innis. I mean, the situation is perfect for him at Ohio State if he becomes a Buckeye. They're recruiting him for the slot Jackson Smith and Jigba replacement, and Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to go to the NFL. I don't think anybody has any question about that after this coming season. So Innis could come in and fill that role. Now, obviously, there's going to be competition there, but I still like Ohio State's chances to win that battle. No guarantees. Brian Hartline's still recruiting him hard, but I like Ohio State in that one. Carnell Tate certainly is still in the running for Ohio State. But as we've talked about before, the NIL's in play, and, Tennessee is working that. And it's just going to depend on, what he looks for, more long-term or more short-term. And he knows what Ohio State can offer him as far as development, as far as being a first-round draft choice and all. They're going to be in Columbus. Innis has got his official visit. It's been lined up for June 17th for a while. So, we'll see what happens. But I still would go with both of them. I'd probably, if gun to my head, I'd probably go with both of them being Buckeyes still at this point. But I think Innis, as you referred to, Dan, is probably a little ahead on that scale right now.
Innis just visited Alabama, and he'll be up here soon. Bill, do you know what happened on Twitter last night with Tate? I don't tend to put too much stock into the Twitter verse when it comes on there. It's just really more NIL BS. You got any vibe on that?
I think they're referring to Tate had tweeted something along the lines of, you can be developed and be a first-round draft choice at basically any school. I think they're referring to that.
That's probably true. I would say the likelihood of being developed into a first-round draft pick is much higher if you're working under Brian Hartline, and I'm basing that on watching the NFL draft. God forbid we'd actually use facts. I'm not going to get into that part. Basically, what they're saying is Ohio State fans were on there maybe giving Tate a little bit of a hard time. Unfortunately, there are some who get on social media and try and get down in the dirt with teenagers. I don't really suggest that as an approach to life, but go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, just to bring up something. About 2 weeks before these camps started, I think we're guilty of beating a dead horse. There's nothing to talk about. We're talking about Innis and Tate over and over and over and over. As soon as these camps start, forget what you heard, forget what you know. Everything gets blown up. All the visits start. All the evaluations are new again. Everybody's 10, 15 pounds different than what the film was. So I think when June 1st starts, there is a natural reset that, yeah, everything changes. You know, we got to rethink these situations that you thought were locks and these guys were just going to commit. It's June. And for the next week again, it's going to reset again. I tell college coaches, the report I send you in February gets blown up to a million pieces as soon as June starts. I have to redo all my rankings. I see kids that are totally different. We just talked about Will Smith and Montgomery. In my book, they went up 5 or 10%, those guys, by the way they look now. Some of the other guys only went up 1 or 2% in their development or their progression. You know, and that's the way I always look at things. What percentage is this guy better than the last time I saw him? And you're starting to see 5, 10, 20% differences in kids.
Yeah. They're also referring to some comments that were made on some other podcasts and stuff. We're not going to get into all that. But what Mark said is true, because if you think about it, these are teenagers. Everything is fluid in recruiting. Guys can grow. And I mean, Will Smith is the perfect example of, 6 months ago, we were discussing him being a possible offer at a different position. And now he looks like he's ready for snaps on the big stage. So everything's fluid. And thankfully, the decisions are in the hands of Ohio State, and they have yet to lead us wrong when it comes to recruiting. They are doing quite a fine job, just like our guys here. Almost 40 minutes in the books. We're going to have to call it quits. We appreciate all your questions. We appreciate your time. Please smash the like button, subscribe, do what you got to do. And we'll be back with these guys next Thursday. Have a good one, Bucknutters.